Characters named after horror legends. In the very first Final Destination movie, almost every main character's name is a tribute to a classic horror filmmaker or actor. For example, the main character Alex Browning is named after Todd Browning, the director of old horror movies like Dracula and Freaks. His best friend Todd Wagner gets his last name from George Wagner, who directed The Wolfman in 1941. But the filmmakers didn't stop this tradition with the first movie. In Final Destination 2, the main character is Kimberly Corman, which is a clever wink to Roger Corman, a legendary B-movie director known for his low-budget horror films that inspired many filmmakers. But names are far from the only hidden secrets. The recurring 180 Easter egg. In the Final Destination series, the number 180 is not just a random number, it's a hidden clue that keeps showing up across the films. It all starts with Flight 180, the doomed plane that explodes in the first movie. This tragic flight is where the entire series begins, with Alex Browning having his terrifying vision that saves him and a few others from the explosion. But 180 doesn't disappear after that movie. In Final Destination 2, which focuses on a massive highway pileup, there's a quick scene where you can see mile marker 180 on Route 23. It's easy to miss because it's just a small sign on the side of the road, but it's a sly nod to the original disaster. The survivors of the highway crash are unknowingly connected to Flight 180's chain of events, and this sign is a way of linking them back to where it all started. In the Final Destination, the number pops up again. There's a scene where the surviving characters meet at a coffee shop, and outside the window, a bus labeled 180 drives by in the background. It's not mentioned, but it's there as a subtle warning that death is still following them. The number 180 shows up in other small places too, like ticket numbers, room numbers, and even hospital signs. And while numbers lingered in the background, a familiar voice kept echoing through the series, even when the character was nowhere to be seen. Tony Todd's hidden cameos. If you've watched the Final Destination movies, you've definitely noticed the creepy mortician William Bloodworth, played by Tony Todd. He's the mysterious man who seems to know all about death's design and gives cryptic warnings to the survivors.
You're not supposed to be here. You're shorted death.
Tony Todd's deep, chilling voice and eerie presence make him unforgettable. But even when Tony Todd isn't physically in a Final Destination movie, the filmmakers still find ways to sneak him in. Tony Todd appears as Bloodworth in Final Destination 1, 2, and 5, but he's missing from Final Destination 3 and the Final Destination Part 4 or so, it seems. In Final Destination 3, he's actually there, but hidden. In the Devil's Flight roller coaster at the beginning of the movie, there's a huge devil statue that talks before the ride starts. That creepy voice you hear is actually Tony Todd. Later, in the film's final scene, when Wendy is on the subway, you can hear an announcement on the PA system. Again, that's Tony Todd's voice. So even though his character isn't seen, his voice still haunts the survivors, acting as death's messenger in a more subtle way. The Final Destination Part 4 is the only main film in the series where Tony Todd has no role, not even a voice cameo. Sometimes, the warnings didn't come from a person or a sign, they were hidden in the songs playing right before tragedy struck. Ominous songs as death's calling card. In the first Final Destination movie, the song Rocky Mountain High by John Denver plays multiple times right before a character dies. This is not just a coincidence. John Denver himself tragically died in a plane crash, which makes the song choice very unsettling, especially since the movie's main disaster is a plane explosion. Every time the song plays in the film, it's like death's way of signaling that someone's time is up. The second movie, Final Destination 2, keeps this tradition alive. Right before the huge highway pileup scene, the song Highway to Hell by AC/DC blasts on the car radio. It's a cheeky but morbid hint that the characters are literally heading toward death on the road. The lyrics are almost like death is mocking them, giving them a chance to realize what's coming, but of course, they don't. Later movies continue this pattern. In Final Destination 3, the oldie Turn Around Look at Me plays during tense moments, adding a spooky vibe with its haunting lyrics. The song seems to be telling the characters to watch their backs, but as usual, they ignore the warning. Then, in Final Destination 5, the song Dust in the Wind by Kansas is used, including in the final airplane scene. This song talks about how life is temporary and fragile, which perfectly fits the theme of the movie. But clues weren't just in the sound. One movie revealed its biggest secret right at the end, flipping the entire story on its head. Final Destination 5's prequel twist. When Final Destination 5 first starts, it looks like a completely new story. There's a big disaster on a suspension bridge, and a group of people cheat death thanks to a character's vision. At first, it feels like just another sequel in the franchise, with no real connection to the other films besides death's design coming back. But the movie has a brilliant hidden secret that shocks viewers in the final moments. It's actually a prequel to the very first Final Destination movie. Throughout Final Destination 5, there are subtle hints that something bigger is going on. For example, in the airport scene near the end, if you listen carefully, you can hear a PA announcement mentioning a flight heading to Paris. That should ring a bell for fans, because Flight 180 in the first movie was a Paris-bound plane. As Sam and Molly sit down in their seats, you can hear background chatter that sounds like the argument from Final Destination 1.
Kid had a panic attack and wanted off the plane. Said he had some kind of vision.
where Alex Browning tries to convince people to get off the plane. There's also a subtle use of the song Dust in the Wind, which quietly plays in the background, hinting at the fleeting nature of life. The twist comes when the camera zooms in on their boarding passes, revealing Flight 180. It hits you then, this isn't just any flight. This is the flight that explodes in the first movie. Moments later, you see the chaos from a new angle as Flight 180 starts to fall apart, confirming that Final Destination 5 leads directly into the events of the first Final Destination. Connections between the films ran deeper than expected, as a chain of survivors realized their lives were linked by a twist of fate. Final Destination 2's survivors were saved by Final Destination 1's victims. Final Destination 2 has a secret plot connection to the first movie that many people don't notice at first. It's not just a random group of people being chased by death again. In fact, all the survivors in Final Destination 2 only escaped their original deaths because of what happened in the first film with Flight 180. The movie reveals this through a clever plot twist that ties the two films together. Halfway through Final Destination 2, the characters start to realize that their lives were saved because the survivors of Flight 180 changed Death's plan. For example, one character was supposed to die in a house fire, but they weren't home because they were delayed by news of the plane crash from the first movie. Another character avoided being in a fatal car accident because Flight 180's explosion caused a traffic jam that slowed them down. Basically, the deaths that should have happened in Final Destination 2 were postponed because of the ripple effect created by Flight 180's disaster. This is why death comes after them now, but in reverse order. Since they cheated death once, they're living on borrowed time, and death is now going back to finish what was supposed to happen. This reverse order death pattern is a unique twist in Final Destination 2, making it different from the first film's order of deaths. Some callbacks were more visual, bringing fans face to face with the series' most brutal deaths in a creative new way. X-ray visions of previous deaths. The opening credits of the Final Destination, the fourth movie in the series, are not just flashy visuals, they're a hidden celebration of the franchise's most iconic deaths. In this sequence, we see a unique X-ray style animation where skeletons are crushed, pierced, and torn apart in brutal ways. But every single death you see in this sequence is a recreation of a famous kill from the previous movies. For example, you'll notice a skeleton getting smashed in the head by a falling ladder. That's a nod to Final Destination 2 when a man is killed by a fire escape ladder. There's also a moment where a skeleton is impaled through the face with multiple nails, which is a gruesome reference to the nail gun death in Final Destination 3. Another skeleton gets hit by a bus, which fans will remember from the shocking bus scene in the very first movie. These are just a few of the callbacks hidden in this gore-filled montage. What makes this so special is how it's presented. Instead of just showing clips from the old movies, the filmmakers recreated these deaths using X-ray vision animations. You see bones cracking, organs splattering, and bodies getting torn apart in see-through form. But sometimes, clues were hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered in something as simple as a photo. Photographs foretell Final Destination 3's deaths. In Final Destination 3, the idea of death leaves clues is taken to a whole new level with the use of photographs. The main character, Wendy Christensen, is a photography enthusiast who snaps pictures of her friends during a carnival before the roller coaster disaster happens. After the accident, she realizes that these photos actually contain hidden clues about how each survivor will eventually die. At first, it seems like a coincidence, but as more people start dying, Wendy notices strange details in the photos. For example, two characters, Ashley and Ashlyn, are shown posing with a big inflatable palm tree. Later, when they die in a tanning salon fire, a small potted palm plant is seen falling and knocking over a shelf, starting the deadly chain reaction. It's as if the photo was predicting their fate in a subtle, creepy way. Another example is Lewis, the high school jock. In his photo, a mallet from a carnival strength game is positioned to look like it's hitting his head. Later, in a gym scene, he dies when a set of heavy weights crashes down and crushes his skull. There are several more photos that foreshadow the characters' deaths, but the clues are often hidden in the background or in the way shadows fall. The idea of subtle foreshadowing wasn't new, it had been woven into the story right from the very first frames. Foreshadowing in the very first frames. Right from the very first frames of Final Destination, the movie starts dropping subtle clues about the deaths that will happen later on. The opening scene is a slow pan across Alex Browning's bedroom, showing everyday objects like books, toys, posters, and travel brochures. But if you look closely, many of these items actually hint at how the characters will die later in the film. One of the most obvious clues is a set of books falling over to reveal the cover of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. In the play, the salesman dies by suicide, and later in the movie, Todd dies in what looks like a hanging accident in his bathroom. It's a hidden warning about his fate, quietly sitting on Alex's bookshelf. Another blink and you'll miss it detail is a French travel guide that flips open to a page showing guillotine executions during the French Revolution. This is a foreshadowing of Billy Hitchcock's death later in the movie, where a piece of metal debris flies off a train track and decapitates him. The guillotine imagery is a sneaky way of hinting at this gruesome fate, and when the calm moments turn deadly, the series paid tribute to a classic horror scare that still works to this day, the Luton bus homage. One of the most shocking and memorable deaths in Final Destination is when Terry Chaney is suddenly hit by a bus. What makes this this moment so powerful is how unexpected it is. One second, she's angrily telling off her boyfriend, Carter, in the middle of a conversation, and the next, a speeding bus slams into her, cutting her off mid-sentence. But this isn't just a random jump scare. It's actually a clever tribute to an old-school horror technique called the Luton bus scare, named after Val Lewton, a producer of classic horror movies like Cat People. In Cat People, there's a famous scene where the audience is on edge, expecting a monster to attack, but instead, a loud bus appears out of nowhere, startling the viewer. This type of fake-out scare became known in film history as the Luton bus. Final Destination tips its hat to this by not only recreating the sudden bus impact scare, but also naming one of its characters Valerie Luton, who later dies in the movie. It's a double Easter egg, a scene that uses the same scare tactic and a character name that honors the origin of that scare. Visual tricks didn't stop there. The filmmakers also used sneaky camera work to make the world feel disturbingly off balance. Reality skewed after the premonition. In Final Destination, there's a secret trick the filmmakers used to show that the world has changed after Alex's vision of the plane crash. It's not something obvious like special effects or loud music. Instead, the filmmakers used a quiet, clever method. They made the real world look off without you even realizing. After Alex and the other survivors get off Flight 180, the movie's visual style subtly shifts. The production team, led by designer John Willett, purposely changed the colors and design of the sets. Walls were repainted in dull, washed-out colors. Some sets were even rebuilt with slightly crooked angles, so things didn't line up perfectly. Even though viewers might not consciously notice it, the world starts to feel strange and uncomfortable. This was done to signal that death's design has taken hold. The characters might think they escaped their fate, but the environment around them quietly suggests otherwise. Everything feels a little wrong, like the universe is now out of balance. The filmmakers wanted the audience to feel uneasy without knowing exactly why. But the most fascinating secret isn't in the films themselves. It's how the entire idea of Final Destination was born from a real-life premonition. Originated from an X-Files idea and a real premonition. The entire idea for Final Destination actually started as a script for the X-Files TV show. Writer Jeffrey Reddick was a big fan of the series and wanted to pitch an episode where FBI agents Mulder and Scully investigate a group of people who avoid a plane crash because one of them has a vision. After escaping death, they start dying one by one in mysterious accidents. This idea eventually became the first Final Destination movie. What's even spookier is that Reddick was inspired by a true story. He read a news article about a woman whose mother had a bad feeling and convinced her not to board a certain flight. The woman listened to her mother, changed her flight, and the original plane actually did crash. This real-life event sparked the idea of fate, premonitions, and people cheating death. Reddick originally called his script Flight 180, which is why the doomed plane in the movie is Flight 180. He sent the script to the X-Files, but the episode never got made. However, New Line Cinema loved the concept so much that they decided to turn it into a full-length movie. Even small details like a character's name hid dark meanings, giving away their fate long before the story reached its tragic end. Todd's fate was hinted from the start. In Final Destination, one of the earliest victims is Todd Wagner, Alex's best friend. Todd's death scene, where he is strangled in his bathroom, is shocking and intense. But what most viewers don't realize is that the movie drops several hints about Todd's fate long before it happens. First, there's his name. Todd isn't just a regular name, it's the German word for death. So, right from the start, his name is a subtle warning about what's coming. It's a dark joke hidden in plain sight, and unless you speak German, you probably wouldn't catch it. But the filmmakers didn't stop there. In the opening credits, as the camera moves through Alex's bedroom, there's a creepy little skeleton toy hanging by a noose. It's a blink and you miss it moment, but it directly foreshadows Todd's accidental hanging in the bathroom later in the movie. It's as if Death's plan was already written in the objects around them. There's also a moment on the plane, before the explosion, where Todd himself unknowingly hints at his fate. When another student asks to switch seats, Todd jokingly makes a hanging gesture with his hands around his neck. It seems like a silly joke at the time, but looking back, it's chilling foreshadowing of how he will die. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every deserved death in Stranger Things, click the video on the screen.